I encourage all the doctors listening to think as much as you can outside the box because everybody's inside the box. And if you're going to distinguish yourself, especially in social media, you need stories that resonate with people, stories that, have scientific veracity, but at the same time, stand apart.
Welcome back to the Med Creator 101 podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Dustin Portella, a board-certified dermatologist and med creator. And I'm joined as always by my co-host, Mimi Banks, founder of MB Social. And we're honored to bring to you a special guest, Dr. Ben Johnson, the founder of Osmosis Skincare.
Dr. Ben is a physician, inventor, and entrepreneur, revolutionizing skincare and wellness with a science-driven, holistic approach. With more than 30 years of experience, he founded Osmosis in 2007 to challenge traditional exfoliation-based skincare, focusing instead on the body's natural healing abilities. His patented innovations have led to clinically proven skincare, supplements, and elixirs that help individuals transform their skin and overall health. Welcome, Dr. Ben.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Can we call you Ben?
Please.
All right, Ben, before we get started, we like to get to know our guests just a little bit. So I want to ask you kind of some rapid fire questions and get your thoughts to get to know you a little bit better.
Okay.
So are you more of a night out or a night in type of guy?
These days, at almost 58, I'm night in.
Very good. What is your guilty pleasure?
Homemade chocolate chip cookies.
Yum.
That is a hard one to beat. Yeah, that's very good. And then favorite vacation spot?
Oh man, if you guys have not been to St. Bart, it is like you're in another world. I don't know how to describe it, but that's definitely my new favorite.
Yeah, I'll have to put that on my list. I've got Costa Rica and Hawaii planned this year. So St. Bart will have to get on there maybe next year. So.
Oh, amazing.
I've never been. It looks absolutely magical.
It feels that way, yeah.
Very cool. And then chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate. There's no question about that.
Makes total sense. The chocolate chip cookies, it's just better.
Yeah, there you go.
Very true. But I would have to say there's nothing like vanilla soft serve.
I was just going to say, though, but with vanilla ice cream and chocolate chip cookies, you might have just trumped the whole thing. You're right.
So, Ben, I'd love to learn more about your career path. You're a trained physician and use your expertise to build a brand. What inspired you to create Osmosis Beauty?
So it was a weird path. I was actually doing sports medicine and PM&R, and laser hair removal had just been FDA approved in 1997. And I thought, wow, that's going to be big. And so I started a clinic while I was in residency, hired a nurse and bought a laser and had it running. And then my residency director came and said, well, you can't do that. And I'm like, but why? I'm not working it like the nurse is working it.
While you're in residency?
Yeah, while I was in residency. And so I had to make a decision. And so I actually made the decision to go ahead and start a chain of laser clinics. And so I ended up creating a chain of 8 clinics in 4 states in less than a year. This is the story for everybody to tell you, don't do that. don't bite off more than you can chew. It's a learning lesson. Like I didn't have central accounting. So each of the managers in each of the facilities kind of had their own marketing budget. And I just didn't have enough control, and nor did I have enough time to keep control of all of those things going on. So I should have and would have hired an executive to oversee that aspect of it. So I ended up with 20 lasers and bankruptcy. Bankruptcy came out of that one. And through that process, of course, I learned a lot. And I learned a lot about the skin. We were doing, obviously, back then it was collagen. We were doing Botox. And we were actually one of the first med spa chains that I've seen. And I think I was one of the first let's say, plastic derms doing med spas. And as a result of that, I got into skincare, and we were doing chemical peels. And so when I had a chance to sort of reset and go, okay, what do I want to do? I fell in love with just formulating. I just always, obviously, I'm an entrepreneurial spirit, but I fell in love with formulating. I had started a skincare company during that time. And my first company is called Cosmetics, spelled DIX at the end. And it's still around today, but I sold my interest. So 2007, it was really sort of revisiting the idea of skincare, because one of the other disheartening things about this industry is I feel like it's a lot of smoke and mirrors, a lot of sales pitches, and that wasn't what I wanted to be about. I wanted to be, when I said, hey, this is going to make your skin younger, I wanted to mean it. And so I ended up coming at it from a really different approach. I felt like I got a real good understanding of where the flaws were in skincare itself and where the flaws were in some of the approaches that we're taking in the clinics, like laser trauma. And the reality that when you burn the skin, you are going to increase collagen production. But I believe most of it is going towards the burn to repair the burn. And therefore, it's not as much of a rejuvenating event. It's more about the edema and the after effects of a burn that make your skin look better for a period of time, but there's no net gain. So my goal was a net gain goal, and that just has fueled me. But then you start to realize, wait, everything is not all surface. There's a lot of internal stuff, internal imbalances, toxicity, metabolic issues that actually create these skin issues. So I began to develop supplements related to that. And so we have a really interesting, I have a lot of patents and patents pending with stuff that you just won't see on the market because I looked at it from this different lens. So I loved having my MD hat on while I was also looking at it from this more holistic approach.
First of all, I'm blown away about the residency. So you've had this hustle mentality. You clearly have a business mind that's innate to you, that you have an idea, you see a gap, and you just go for it. That's what I'm understanding.
My dad was a radiation oncologist, and he started a French bakery and French restaurant. And so there was a little bit of that gene in me, I guess. And so, you learn along the way. I've been embezzled from several times. A lot of it is learning on the job, but no, of course, you get sophisticated. You learn how to hire the right people. You learn where your weaknesses are. And that's what I advise people is some people are really detail oriented. I'm more the creative guy. So I need that detail oriented person helping me along the way.
So again, I'm in awe. I think already this is inspiring for any medical professional listening. If you have an idea, you can go for it. It's not always easy to start a business. I can speak from experience, as can Dustin. So having said what you're doing now, I think the model of business in general is different, specifically with skincare. How do you then integrate, or how did you upskill yourself to understand how to use social, or how you're showing up in your brand using social? Specifically now, knowing that you learn very quickly, you learn on the job, you learn from successes and also failures or challenges. How has social played a role in that?
Oh, well, obviously it's such an important part of the story today, and it's such an important part of growth and building brand loyalty. For me, we try to focus our attention is content that is meaningful. There's a lot of skincare companies that focus their social on pretty pictures and stories about, an antioxidant that came from this amazing fruit in West Africa or something. And, that's not my thing. My thing was, look, this is how this ingredient works in the skin. These are the clinical trials, or these are the research studies that were done on this ingredient to support it, and then tie that into my philosophy. So, for example, there's a pretty basic skincare ingredient today is niacinamide. And, it's a B vitamin, and yet it has all these advantages for, say, collagen, wound healing, acne, and all these things. But no one's ever really said, well, what is the primary physiologic role? And I realized that one of the biggest issues the skin has is as we age, we lose circulation. So I think niacinamide's main driver is feeding what your skin would naturally do anyway if it had more nutrient, more oxygen, and more immune cell activity. And so that's just one small example of how I'll take content and go, not just say, oh, this is a nice ingredient and here's what it does, but explain it to people.
Well, it sounds like a new take on niacinamide. I'm sure Dustin would have a lot to say there, but it's actually also a trendy ingredient you do see in a lot of social content, a lot of skincare brands, but I've also never heard it explained that way at all.
Right. And I haven't either. And so it's been fun for me to look at it through that lens. And yeah, we could talk about several ingredients where I'll give you an example just on vitamin A's. For a lot of doctors, when they're starting a skincare company, I know this is a trend right now, right? Doctors starting their own skincare line. They'll go to the lab. And the first time I started my first line, I relied heavily on the lab. I was learning along the way. But they present you with their ingredients. They're thinking inside the box already. Okay, of course you need your vitamin C or you need your retinol. But what I've learned about retinols is, well, we've been, I think, ahead of the game. Retinaldehyde, Dustin, are you familiar?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Retinaldehyde has just, to me, soared up as a leader. And it was from the beginning when I formulated, because I saw that it had the clinicals that showed it was as active as retinoic acid, but it didn't have the same inflammatory effects on the epidermis. And so as a result, it made sense to me. I just happened to find one that was stabilized because that was its biggest issue back in the day. Dr. Kligman actually wanted to use retinaldehyde when he was he settled on retinoic acid, but he actually retinaldehyde was his first choice. He just couldn't stabilize it. And so realizing that less is more sometimes. And a lot of times people are using excess retinol leading to excess exfoliation. And like you said, Mimi, I don't really subscribe to a daily exfoliation, which I know is also a standard out there in medicine today, or it seems to be diminishing, but still a standard. I encourage all the doctors listening to think as much as you can outside the box, because everybody's inside the box. And if you're going to distinguish yourself, especially in social media, you need stories that resonate with people, stories that, have scientific veracity, but at the same time, stand apart.
That's an interesting point. When you can present information to somebody that is counter what the dominant narrative is, it does draw in attention because you're doing something different, and it causes people to stop and ask their own questions and then look for those answers. And what we see in the social media era is that a more informed consumer is a better patient. They're a better client, and they're out there advocating for themselves.
Oh, yeah. My best clients are skincare nerds, as they would affectionately call themselves. And I love it. And so I love the idea of just diving deep into those discussions. And it's a sad truth. I know, Dustin, you're a different breed than that, but it is a sad truth. The number of times I've tried to engage with dermatologists about alternative views, they're really hard to push off center and even give consideration to ideas. I remember at a trade show one time, I was talking to a dermatologist and I was posing to him that because I think melasma is caused by liver damage, and it's actually a reflection of liver damage on the skin. And I was explaining like how birth control hurts the liver, and I see it in liver transplant patients, and how I was putting all these things together to get to that. I mean, he literally started walking away while I was talking. And I'm like, this is what I better get used to.
Well, it is challenging. I think those are important conversations to have about alternate mechanisms. And it's true that many physicians are not willing to ask those questions. And I'm reluctant to blame the physician. I think it's more the incentive structure that most physicians are in. And it doesn't reward that alternative thinking. And the incentives are aligned such that, like, you've got to see this many patients a day. If you want to just break even, you've got to play the insurance game. You've got to do these things. And if you start saying, well, what if I need to start looking at the liver in melasma patients and all these things, you're not rewarded for that. It's going to take you more time and decrease your reimbursement. And when you're in that system, it's an incentive structure problem.
Do you have an esthetician on staff or?
Yeah.
Okay. So to me, that's where you defer, be intrigued, maybe, be open to it, and then go, but I can't really tackle it as my main practice focus. So I'm going to see how that works over here with my nurse esthetician or what have you. So I'm hoping more do that.
Yeah, you have to put those structures in place.
Yeah.
As your brand evolves, you started in 2007. Marketing was probably very different back then. When did you realize social media was going to be a big part of your marketing strategy and your education strategy for consumers, for estheticians, for physicians?
Well, let's see. I mean, I was definitely doing YouTube videos early on. I had one that caught fire where I was describing the connection between rosacea and gut health. And, I don't know, it was back then it had like 60,000 views. And I'm like, oh man, that's a winner. And you just realize there's a lot of patients out there that are desperate for help, that are looking for ideas and answers. And so the more ways you can reach them, the better. I'm not even tapped the surface of the areas I want to dive into, I think the peer-to-peer network, even through something like LinkedIn. But one of the challenges I'll tell you that I just had recently is I'm going beyond skin. I'm trying to help more serious conditions, female health, things like that. We have a treatment for endometriosis that's really kind of wild. So I was talking about it on Instagram on an Insta Live, and turns out the FDA was watching. And so they gave us a call and they're like, hey, you can't say that. And so there is that fine line where you have to curtail what you say. Like even on our website, because I don't use benzoyl peroxide or salicylic acid, I can't even use the word acne on my website, and it's so silly. We're a bit curtailed. And so I was using Instagram as my primary way to get stuff out there, thinking that's sort of free from those confines. But no, turns out no. But yeah, no, we're continuing to work to build our YouTube presence, our Instagram presence. And it's hard when you have a skincare company. It's hard to differentiate yourself. Everybody's got a story, and consumers don't know how to determine the difference usually. But you fellow physicians, being a physician carries a lot of weight, and they're more likely to listen to you, to stop and listen. And so, yeah, I think it's a huge thing. So when did it start? I can't remember. It's probably in around the 2010 mark where we started doing more and more, but it's definitely been, I would say, the last 7 years or so where it has to be part of your business to reach the people because that's where the people's eyeballs are today. They're not anywhere else, And so even TV, like I would never run TV commercials because I don't know if anyone's ever watching them anymore. So yeah, I think it's an amazing tool to reach people. And it's a strength again for me because we have so much content that sort of distinguishes us from the rest.
No, I think that's really good. And you've used it well personally and as a brand. A big part of the Osmosis brand is also connection with estheticians and other healthcare professionals. How do you organize that? And how do you work with other healthcare professionals or cosmetic providers, estheticians in marketing your brand and getting that information to consumers?
We did a lot of our early building through the trade show circuit. There's usually like 12 major shows that you can go to. I just went to my first dermatology show in a while, it's integrative dermatology show that was down in Vegas. And I spoke on stage to try to really get this opportunity to go, hey, listen to these ideas. Let me know what you think. I have a sales team of about 17 in the States. And then we have, like 25 international distributors, but it's a process. And so you're trying to figure out how do you get your more scientific message through the mouth of a salesperson who doesn't quite speak exactly the way you do and doesn't quite have the scientific language in order to create that effect, especially into the physician market. So I'm always looking for opportunities to engage one-on-one with physicians when I can. We still are calling on them. And most of the time it's through their med spas because so many people are starting their own med spas. Amazing. And so we're doing a lot through that, but the content carries. And so we have online education course and, I have so many videos over the years that they can go back and draw from. And then I have my own podcast called Ask Dr. Ben. I've been a bit behind on my content, but I'm using every method possible. I write a lot for the aesthetic trade journals. I write articles for them. I have won awards as a content creator. Yeah, no, it's just fun because I love being a disruptor and we'll use our PR team to try to get as many stories in the major magazines as we can. It's a multi-pronged approach for sure.
I really like something you said there as a disruptor. And I think that that is a key part of being an entrepreneur. And I think that's a lesson that we can share with our audience that when you turn to social media, whether you're building a personal brand, whether you want to build a skincare brand or some other, health service, whatever it is, if you just fall in line and do the same thing that everybody else is doing, it's really hard to make a splash. You have to find how are you going to disrupt the current landscape of things and stand out. And that takes education, it takes perseverance, and you've shown that throughout the course of your career. You've always done things different, and nobody starts their own business while they're in residency.
I didn't realize.
And that's kind of been the story, is that you're not afraid of being a disruptor. And I think that's a key takeaway.
Totally. But it's the same thing with like using Instagram Live. And I think part of your success as an entrepreneur is that being scrappy is I have a mission and how can I get my mission out? How can I communicate? How can I do that effectively? I'm going to try all of the ways. And you're a creator in so many ways that, you created businesses. You talked about creating content. Can you share a little bit more about all of the content you created? Did you have formal training? Did you treat this like the rest of your business? You just started to see what works. We have a podcast that you're creating content. So I think the fact that you have done all of this creation really lends itself to your success.
Yeah, that one's a bit trickier because I'm an extrovert. I'll be honest. Most of the physician fellow graduates I got out of Creighton Medical School with, they weren't as naturally personable. Like there is a natural level of it. And I do think you can do training. I kind of trained on the job. I've been at this. So my first company I started actually in 1997. I was teaching classes and learning how to teach. And then that naturally took me into the social media realm where you're basically teaching to the camera. And so for me, it's come naturally. But if you don't have that, you do want to take training and you do want to get the coaching that shows you how to draw them in, or I don't know, change your tone. I don't even know what they teach actually, but hopefully I'm doing the right stuff most of the time. And yeah, I think it's been well received. So I do think I've been lucky. And I would tell people if they're wanting to start their own business and they're a little bit more, I don't know, serious, a little bit more introverted, it's hard because you really want the founder to be the spokesperson if you can. But sometimes it's certainly okay to have an amazing right-hand person who's your spokesperson as well. So you don't have to just be like, oh, I don't have that, so I'm not going to do it. There you can find partners who have the talents that you might not have.
The other thing that I'm hearing from you is you just kind of try it. You just kind of try it. It's not to overthink and just to start, which was actually one of the teasers of our podcast, Dustin, of like when we started Med Creator, is that it's very easy to overthink. It's very easy to compare yourself against other people on social media. I mean, personally, it was very scary for me to even put myself out here to create content and to know there are going to be so many people listening. And I just jumped in. And I think that that's what you've been doing since residency is just jumping in. So you can try it. Maybe it's not as bad as you think. Maybe you'll be good at it. Maybe you won't be good at it, but you won't know unless you try.
I encourage people to be as fearless as they can. Leaving residency to go start your clinic, that choice was so funny because I remember the moment when my residency director sat me down. She's like, "You're going to do what?" And so the next thing I get is, "We need a med eval just to make sure you're not having a psychological breakdown." And I was like, "I'm fine. No, this is the choice I'm going to make. We'll see what happens." And, I've always taken on these things with a bit of a fearless mindset, and that gets you into trouble too, right? I mean, I've certainly then learned through the stumbles of all the different ways you can fail in business. And so you have to overcome that, and it makes you stronger. And entrepreneurship is definitely, it's not for everyone.
No.
Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. You talked about that early stumble. You left residency. Most people would consider that a disastrous decision. You had these clinics, ended up in bankruptcy. How do you have that mindset to not get discouraged by those setbacks? Not saying that there weren't moments of discouragement, but some people might take that and give up and say, I just need to go back to following the path. Maybe I'll get back into residency and finish that. How do you maintain that positive attitude despite setbacks?
Well, I definitely went through a little period of sadness for sure. I did reconsider traditional medicine for sure. It just sort of happened so quickly that the skincare company that I had started really got a lot of traction. And so it was just enough to make me think, you know what, let me see what happens with this. And of course, now my lifestyle is unbelievable. And I honestly, it cut off from, we were just talking, Dustin, earlier about insurance billing and all of that. Not having that I really never had that. Imagine that. I've never had to bill a patient. And so, because even all my clinics, obviously that was cash pay. I also tried to bite off way too much. And so if you're just starting a med spa, my best advice is just to remember that the lasers that they're selling you have a lifespan. They have a marketability for a shorter period of time. That's the biggest thing I didn't learn is like, as new iterations come out, the patients get savvier and they're like, well, yeah, I'll do laser hair removal. Do you have the blank laser? Well, no, we have the, first generation. Oh, okay, never mind. So you think you have a mindset of how am I going to pay these back in a certain time frame? You learn quickly. I learned really hard. Like I bought into the idea that the first laser I bought was a ruby laser that they told me there was permanent results. They got away with saying that. They said, oh yeah, 3 treatments of the 3 follicular phases and you're done. And so I promoted that to my patients and guaranteed them their results. So I learned, oh, oops, laser companies lie to you too. And so, there's so many different ways you can get burned, literally and pun intended.
This is amazing. Again, the resilience, the fearless mindset, I think is really what has driven you today. I wanted to see, as a founder, do you consume content? Do you consume skincare content? What are your social media habits?
Only primarily from physicians and only just to see where the mindset is of the moment. I'm pretty isolated from my competition even because things are going well and I like the results I'm getting. And I feel like we're trend leaders so I'm not looking for the trends. And like, for example, for a while there, everyone came out with these little silly masks where they put a bunch of like 2 pumps of ingredients equivalent onto a mask. And they were selling them to people for $100 and it's a take-home mask I'm like, well, that's a ripoff to the end user. I would never do that to them. That's like a tenth of a bottle and you're charging them a full bottle price just because you've got this cheap Chinese mask layer, right? So just stuff like that where don't chase the trends. That faded away. But no, so my content has a lot to do because I've kind of branched out into a lot more health related issues because skin and health get connected so easily. I am just constantly looking for new innovative ideas in that realm, I guess, more than anything.
As you're looking for new ideas, Dustin and I have spoken about this a lot, is that on social media, you see people who have graduated from TikTok University. And so they figure out ways in which that they believe that they know skincare better than a trained physician. Have you seen a lot of those skincare myths or hacks that stand out to you?
Well, I'm the person maybe that you're referring to that's helping train them in their university, unfortunately or fortunately. I'm always giving out the Mythbuster storylines to help them understand whether it be something like most people think vitamin C is role in the skin as an antioxidant, but in reality, it's a hydroxylator, right? So it's pushing the hydroxylation of amino acids to build collagen and elastin, and that's its main anti-aging goal. And so you're helping people to look at it through a different lens. There's a well done study that shows if you apply retinoic acid to the skin every day for a year, you get an 18% thinning of the papillary dermis, and over 5 years, as much as a 30% thinning of the papillary dermis. And so I'm out there telling people I don't recommend retinoic acid. I don't know why so many doctors are. And here's why. I'm as much guilty of being that person because I am providing this disruptive content. So I subscribe to it. I'll tell you, for example, I know that diet and acne are connected, right? And so the people watching TikTok learned that diet was a part of acne before the dermatologists started to come around and go, oh, there might be a connection. And I would still argue, and I don't know, I think Dustin's well ahead of this game, but I would still argue maybe 80% of dermatologists say that diet and acne have nothing to do with each other. But these people go home and they stop drinking dairy, and lo and behold, I start seeing changes in their skin. They're like, well, it's not proving to be true in my own personal testing. And so, yeah, I guess that's how I'd answer that question.
Yeah. And I think the difference is that as a disruptor, you're finding the science and then bringing that alternative model to the public view through social media versus, the person that is mixing up baking soda masks in their pantry and doing that as a hack. But you have the foundation before you bring that. And as, some people will perceive that as not accurate, if they're stuck in that traditional model and everything. But I think that's the point I want to get across is that you're not just doing random things and coming up with hypotheses. You're starting with, this is what you're seeing through clinical experience in your business and scientific publications that are coming out. And then you're then making the leap from a scientific basis, which I think is what the goal really is. And again, not everybody's willing to do that or entertain those thoughts.
Such a good point. You're right. I'm not thinking of all the crazy ideas that people in their kitchen are like, oh, let me tell you what works. And I know for sure. And yeah, that's so true. And so I don't see as much of that, but it is dangerous. And there are actually a lot of people chasing things that I think are crazy ideas. So, because I do come at it from a more scientific and medical approach, I'm all about a certain version of those. But that's the other thing is, there's such a sea of BS. And I feel bad for the consumer because, how to differentiate amongst all of them, it's really hard. But you're right. There is a lot of these people where I'm like, please don't listen to that.
I really think a key takeaway is that if you're a creator, if you're a physician, don't be married to a paradigm that is unchangeable, where the only changes that can come are going to be from that ivory tower of academia, and then you'll change your behaviors and your habits. You have to be willing to ask those questions, willing to challenge the current paradigm. And not everybody is willing to do that. And I appreciate that you have been and you are, and you're pushing in that space, because I think more people, whether it's a consumer, a physician, an esthetician, need to be asking those questions and willing to take that leap and be a disruptor. So that's, a key takeaway for me out of this conversation, which has been just super fun and enlightening. And, I've got a huge package from Osmosis Skincare here. If our listeners are interested in trying the products, how can they find them? Is this something you sell online? Do you have to get it through an authorized retailer that you guys distribute to? What's that process look like?
Well, we have an MD range that's for the professional MD market, and that has to be purchased. You can view those products online, but you can't buy them unless you're communicating with the professional. And then we have a retail range, which is about 20% weaker, that is available like on our website, osmosisbeauty.com, and through all the traditional channels you might be familiar with, Derm Store and all those. And then the wellness is available everywhere as well, because wellness is just like an up and comer. We were ahead of the game, but it's still a growing part of the brand. So we made that available pretty much through every channel. I mentioned my podcast, Ask Dr. Ben. You'll see a lot of videos on the website you can get to. We're about to fix our website to make it a little bit more navigatable. We were finding consumers were getting stuck because we can't use the keywords that we'd like to use. And so you can get it there. But yeah, the products are really different. Like the formulas, you just won't see anybody else using formulas like ours. We use liposome delivery because penetration is such a big part of trying to get a result if you're trying to activate dermal activity. And so a lot of unique strategies there. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy them. Did we send you any wellness, or is it all topical?
I got to go dig through it more. There's so many products in there. So
yeah.
But if not, I'll hit you up for some wellness products, because that's certainly an area that I'm really big into. So we're going to make sure we link to Osmosis Beauty, your website, the podcast, Ask Dr. Ben. Anybody that is listening can follow Osmosis Beauty, Osmosis_Beauty on Instagram and TikTok. And if you're interested in trying Osmosis Beauty, we will have a unique link and discount code available in the podcast show notes, so you can find these products, whether you want the skincare or the wellness products. I think they're both worth checking out. Dr. Ben, this has been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate your time coming on the Med Creator podcast and sharing not only your journey as a creator, but some really interesting approaches to skincare and to wellness that I think more people need to look into.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, everybody.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Med Creator podcast. If you found this episode to be helpful, please share it with a friend. Leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts, and we'll catch you on the next episode.